Hey friends, it's Bytrius here today, and today I want to introduce you to my brand new series I'm going to be calling Bytes Basics, where we go over like a bunch of mapping stuff. And first episode, what I want to talk about today is a thing called full spreads. Now, in case you live under a rock or you genuinely don't know, a full spread is when you have all five difficulties in a song mapped. So easy, normal, hard, expert, expert plus, yada yada yada, right? So the big reason why I wanted to start this series on full spreads is because the number one thing I get told by people who are newer to the community or trying to get into Beat Saber is, well, either one, that the songs that they like aren't mapped, which boohoo L, and the second is that these songs are maybe mapped, but they are too difficult for them. There's just an expert plus out there for them, and that stinks. Obviously, if you like a song by, I don't know, Taylor Swift, you would want to go play that. But then you're stuck playing this absurdly hard version of, I don't know, Blank Space or something. And you're just, so you're sitting here at this wall where it's like, you're basically just being told to get good, and there's not really a good way to introduce you to higher level stuff, playing music that you actually enjoy. And maybe you enjoy EDM, which will definitely help you out in that regard because there's a lot more of that in the game. But if you're just a general music fan and you listen to just like generally pop artists and that kind of stuff, or God forbid rock and metal, like it can be very hard to get into that kind of stuff. So I wanted to talk about full spreads today because I decided to take it upon myself to make a whole guide on how I personally approach it. I've been doing full spreads for about a couple years now, even though I've been mapping for as long as I have been. At this point in time of recording, I've only been really going ham with the full spreads, which what really started around the time I made the I Prevail True Power album pack, because I really wanted to make an accessible pack for some people. So this is really just stuff from my perspective. I just want to preface that, like, I specialize, in case you don't know who I am, I'm Bytrius. I specialize in like rock, metalcore, punk, and that kind of stuff when it comes to music genres. And while I've done a decent amount of electronic stuff as well, I tend to approach stuff like that just slightly differently. And, maybe everything I talk about today doesn't necessarily apply to you if your main thing is EDM, but I still think a lot does. I also just wanted to let you know that the perspective I'm coming from is primarily as someone who is like a balanced accuracy and dance mapper who's still integrating like elements of tech into their style, as I've been like refining my style over the years. As for the other categories of mapping, meaning stuff like Fitbeat, Challenge, Speed, or like other alternative styles of play like 360 One Saber and that kind of stuff, this guide might have elements of what you may be looking for, but probably won't apply as much. So I'd take everything I say here with a pinch of salt, knowing how my brain operates as someone who is just inexperienced in making those types of maps. So, but yeah, as was the case with my first mapping tips video, just a general 10 tips I listed out, I'm sure there'll be plenty of mappers who may wholeheartedly disagree with my takes and methods, and that is totally fine, and I absolutely respect it. Different opinions are very cool. There is far more than just one type of way to make competent full spreads. I'm sure some of your favorite mappers all do it differently from each other. I'm sure Beat Games, I know, like, has their own methods and their own guidelines as to how they do their full spreads. This is just my tips. Like, this is how I operate. But anyway, I've been rambling long enough. We'll get into it now. So the first thing that I want to start with here is Expert Plus. Expert Plus should always be like your true vision of the map. The only exception being that you're making something like unhinged, that it needs to go in a lawless category or something like that, which means no rules are necessary. I'm not going to talk much about that since a good portion of you watching this you already likely know how to make an Expert Plus. But the one piece of advice I will give for note density is that because it is the highest difficulty of the song does not mean that you absolutely need to map and represent every single sound that exists. If you're conflicted on whether you should map that soaring melody or just focus on the percussive elements of the song, or hell, even combine them, all of these options are perfectly okay. But when you use the combination option, just make sure your map doesn't feel too cluttered or messy or thrown together where it ends up just playing like it's just bland and it's just a bunch of uninspiring notes on the beat. So like this is just the example I have here for my like an expert plus map style that you might see from me. So I just kind of threw together, like, we got windows, we got wide stuff, we got arcs, pickles, all the juicy stuff, right? We've got like full lane crossovers, chains, window, yeah, like I think I said windows already, but like you get the point. So for expert plus, depending on what kind of map you're making, this is kind of, unless you're really making unhinged stuff like with resets or like a ton of duck walls for 5 beat and stuff, like this is kind of just anything goes. So I don't really want to elaborate on this too much. But anyway, next one I want to talk about is expert. The way I do my lowers in general is that I copy paste the higher one into the one I'm working on next. So let's say I want to go do that. Let's go copy and then paste. This is at least how it works in Chrome Mapper. And then I usually like adjust the NJS. I get a little bit lower. Or I, you know, adjust the stuff. Yada yada yada. Let me. What was that? Yeah, that's no. Let's. I try to get like a higher JD like every single time, because when I map this, I actually map for the player's skill level, not necessarily like ACK players, because they're lame. But no, not a diss against ACK players. I love y'all. But now that I've done that, now I can kind of use it as a reference in real time to see how much I need to nerf it or make changes to make it adequate. And so one thing I have listed here on my notes is that I like to simplify streams so that it isn't so I guess it poses a challenge with this notes density, but also makes the eventual progression into expert plus a lot more natural. So like let's say I have this stream right here, right? Like this requires your hands to like kind of like cross over each other a little bit, right? So maybe for expert, I take something like this and I just dumb it down to that, so that it's more like you're keeping your hands more in place rather than having to read complex notes across multiple lanes. Or I just do something akin to that. But yeah, the way I see it, expert is mostly just the expert plus, but abridged or nerfed. I would take out the majority of stuff like full body crossovers as well. So something like this, I would just like nerf down to this, or I would maybe change something like this to, nope, wrong color. Change something like this to maybe be a little less wide so that people can keep their arms in place a little bit more. So we got something like this now. So it still plays roughly the same as the Expert Plus. It's just not so intense on your arms. And that's kind of my goal for Expert. But I'm not going to copy paste it into the hard when I talk about this, but now we're just going to move on to the hard. Once we get to this difficulty, for me personally, things take quite a change. After I've copied it into the hard diff slot, just imagine I've done that, I change how I see emphasis a bit. One thing that really helps me when it comes to not just mapping hard, but also normal and easy, is imagining I have like 10-pound weights on my arms when I'm swinging. Once you can like picture that and slow down your swinging and focus more on just getting your sabers to make it to each note, like it's a destination you really have to get to, the more easier you can really put yourself in the shoes of someone at that skill level. At least that's what I find personally. And, you know, as we get lower, just pretend that those weights are really increasing in size. So, like, if I have 10-pound weights, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily, like, hard for me to swing at the notes or anything, but it makes getting to that distance of a note a lot harder. So, for hard, I would do something where I would maybe, do something like this. Instead of having like all these windows and stuff, you can keep windows in hard. I would just save them for like opportune moments where it really makes sense in the song. Like for hard, I would make it so that the distance between notes is much shorter. So that you're not struggling too much with it. So like even just like that, like flicking up to this would be pretty difficult for a hard player, and they'd probably like shit miss a bunch here. So you really want to make sure that like, and like for this, like this is still kind of maybe for this, like it seems like I'm increasing it, but I'm just kind of dumbing down the complexity of this part a little bit. And then for this, because there's an art coming out here, I'm putting more emphasis on this swing, so it would be okay for something like this to stay in hard if whatever in the song, if it represents the sound correctly. Obviously, depending on the song, it's gonna be changed or whatever. But yeah, you basically just want to make sure, like something like this in hard, I would say is completely unacceptable. Even in expert, it's a little sketchy, honestly. So I would maybe just like move it kind of more over to the left so that you're not crossing over your body so much. And then even something like this, I would just like nerf to something that's a little bit more digestible and you don't have to swing as far of a distance to get. I do think chains are fine and hard as long as you use them scarcely. And then yeah, we'd like keep a stream like this, maybe even for hard, dumb it down even a little bit more. And you know, also in hard, when you are making stuff, you can also take a lot of these patterns and you don't even have to make them like full streams or something. Like you can really dumb down the emphasis of them so that it's not super note dense, because that's just going to make like your notes per second a lot higher, and it's still going to be um really hard for some people to grasp that kind of stuff. So maybe you want to like move stuff like this. I'm just using a blank example. Clearly there is no audio here, so none of you should recognize any kind of melody, wink wink. But you want to like dumb down streams as well to make sure that like what people are reading, I would say like stuff like gallops, like stuff that's like here, let me get on an actual beat here. So stuff like this, like if you're doing a stream that's like all four, I think when you do gallops like this or something, that actually tends to work for me really well. So that you keep like this emphasis of there's a lot of things, but it's still like easy to read and you still feel like you're hitting a lot of notes well. But yeah, this is usually in general, if you couldn't tell, where I change the most in like representation and emphasis. You should be limiting yourself to the sounds that you're focusing on, and you should really hone in on like prominent melodies for dynamic but simple patterns. And if it calls for it, you can also focus on like the percussive elements of the music as well. Again, like I've said this a million times now, but it really just depends on the kind of song you're doing. I'm coming from the perspective of a rock and metal mapper. But yeah, you don't want to do too much combination of different elements if you can avoid it. You really just want to like hone in on one thing that's going on, whether it's like the vocals or it's the melody or it's the drums. Because otherwise the complicated rhythms can like throw players off parity and out of their groove fast, and yeah, stuff like that. But lastly, I would say if you used window notes on the higher difficulties, which in case you don't know for some reason are these, where you can look through them. If you want more stuff on how to use window notes, go watch my top 10 tips video for mappers. But I would significantly reduce the amount that you have for hard. You don't have to get them rid of them. I would just say turn most of them into stacks, or turn most of them into doubles. I did not mean to clip that. Oopsie daisies. Ignore that. I'm still getting used to this talking to nobody thing, but also talking to everybody. It is harder than it looks. But yeah, so some notes I have here is stuff like the stuff I think you should use scarcely are duck walls, windows, chains, and sliders. And just in case you don't know what a slider is, that's something that like looks, you've probably seen them in like older maps or something, or like Score Saver rank maps. They kind of look like this. Or they're like a note with staggered dot notes after the word afterwards to kind of have a longer, chunkier motion, which, and you know, like the modern version of that now would be something like, oh, I actually don't need that, but modern chunkier version now would be something like a chain like this, that you can like adjust and stuff like that. But anywho, I still think that in hard you can also just make use of doubles, crossovers, stacks, even diagonals are fine. Arcs are also fine in hard. But then we get to normal. Now, this difficulty is for the players who have played a few maps now and are ready to try and take on something slightly more note dense, you know. But for me personally, this is always the hardest for me to map, because what is acceptable in a normal difficulty can really range depending on your song choice. Normal should not be something overcomplicated. It's meant mostly for people who are pretty accustomed to just the basics of Beat Saber, like swing in direction of note, you know, and they just want to test themselves a bit. It's very easy to go overboard with it and make something that you personally think is interesting, but to the player, it is just overwhelming them, and it is too much information for them to process. You have to really be careful making this difficulty, and what I do is, like, I imagine, like, my parents dancing to the song while making it. So you want to keep the movements mostly simple. So you don't want to do stuff like complicated directions. I would say, like, when I go from normal to easy, actually, I don't really need this as an example too much more. Let's just like pick up something else. This is where stuff really changes for me. Um, when doing normal, you really want to make sure, like, you can have diagonals and stuff, but you really want to limit where you use them, because when a player sees a diagonal as a normal player, they might get a little thrown off seeing something so tilted weird. But you want to kind of keep things to be basic on the beat, and you don't really want it to stray too much outside of each other's hands. So, like, some things that I have that are completely like no-goes for me on normal are complicated directions, like if I have the right hand in the left lane, or I have the left hand in the right lane. Or resets are kind of still a no-go for this. Windows are an absolute no-go. Do not put a window in normal. It is too hard for players to read, and you should, like I said, use them very scarcely and hard. Do not use them in normal. Even and then, yeah, sliders and chains as well. Like, I also am against using these in normal, because there's too many note types that you're introducing to a player of this caliber. So you want to make sure that you're really easing them into, like, the basic types of things. Like, just directional swinging is what should be the goal here. But some things that I think that are like okay as well are like doubles, as long as you just use like simple ones like this or this, or this, or even like the wider ones are mostly fine sometimes. But don't use stuff like this in normal. Like, you don't use like the really wide ones that require to cross their arms over. You want to keep the right hand and the left hand like in their respective areas as much as possible, is what I've noticed. uh you can use kind of gallopy patterns like this, just really, yeah, be careful. I would also even kind of cool it on arcs, because while I think that they're a more okay element to introduce to people visually than chains in normal, I still think that they can be misused really badly. So if you're going to use arcs in normal, really make sure it's something that like you have to hold on, and it's something that I don't want to make those changes. Oopsie, I pressed the wrong key. Ignore that. Make sure that it's something that you can really hold on, so that you can really introduce, hey, this is what this mechanic does. You really want to, you don't want to baby the player, but you also don't want to not baby them, I guess, if that makes any sense. But yeah, and something that I like to do for my nose is I like to create like easy to recognize patterns or something. Like, if I get to like a chorus or something in a song and there's like really big hits or something, we'll do something like this, where it's like maybe have like a wall here, like a wall here or something. And you really want to make sure that it's like something that's digestible, but like a fun thing for them to repeat maybe at that skill level. And then, I would like mirror that or something, right? um but and then my last note I have here for normal is to make sure to use walls the best you can to like fill empty space, because obviously the more notes you delete and stuff, from extra plus all the way down to easy, you're going to be leaving a lot more empty space. So you want to make sure that a lot of that empty space that you have, especially if you're not doing lights, you're filling it more with walls, so that it's not visually boring, and the wall, that many kind of walls, is going to encourage a lot of those new players to really like move their head and get used to moving around a little bit playing Beat Saber. Because you're going to have a lot of patterns that require you to move in very unconventional ways in the higher difficulties. So you want to at least make the ways that you do move in these ones like conventional. And it generally, like, walls in your maps, a lot of them in the lowers, makes them feel so much more alive than if the easy or normal just looks like this, where it's just like, this is less, like, this is boring to look at. If I do this, um then it's infinitely more interesting, right? Just putting a couple walls in the mix and encouraging movement. But anyway, speaking of easy, the last difficulty that I want to talk about, a big thing I want to hammer home here. This should not cater as much to accuracy players as it should to actual beginner players of the game. Easy diffs, as much as ACK players wish they were, are not ACK maps. They are for beginners, unfortunately, or at least that is the way that I see it. I don't mean that, like, what I say is law. I know I'm saying it like it's law, but it's really not. But like, from my perspective, if you're going to make an easy, this is something that, like, your 8-year-old cousin who is trying out VR should be able to play. Like, not saying an 8-year-old should be in VR. You should be 13 or above, but that's what I mean. Is like, it should be people that are just learning the mechanics of the game and are like just playing it for the first time and are getting used to things. So yeah, the goal of an easy difficulty is to make sure that your map set is accessible to people who just got into the game. Yeah, that's what I have in my notes here. And they just want to play the songs that they have fun listening to, which can be really tricky to do as someone who plays at a higher difficulty, to put yourself in the shoes of that beginner again. But like I mentioned earlier, even just having friends or family who haven't really messed with VR, that like, try some maps out to see what like specific things they struggle with, and what they nailed first try really help, and like what they struggle with really helped my perspective on how to approach making these. Like my roommate, when she started playing Beat Saber, one thing that she struggled with when it came to my normal difficulties, which is kind of where she wanted to start out with, is having notes in the opposite lanes. It screwed with her vision and stuff, and she had a hard time trying to figure out where those were. So I kind of made it a rule from then on in like all my normals, where I just keep these on the respective sides for normal and easy. And if I do a crossover, it needs to be very obvious. Like, if you're going to do a crossover, it needs to be very obvious. And honestly, I wouldn't even do crossovers in easy. Just keep it simple. Keep it only to up, up, down, down. Sometimes, if you really want to, you can do like some side notes, but really, really careful on where you place them. But you generally just want to keep notes here, or even like here. You can kind of do diagonals sometimes, but you should really like be careful about how you use them, because that also might screw with the thing. You just keep it in very basic directions for easy players. The goal, like this isn't the map that people are going to be like coming back to a lot. So a lot of people complain about like, I don't want to make easy diffs because like people either play them once and dip, or they just don't want to play them. To which I say, boo-hoo. Wah, wah, wah. That's all I hear. You should still make it accessible for them. So yeah, so stuff like crossovers, stacks, complicated directions and rhythms. So even if you have something like this, like where it's like a note coming really fast after the other one, really make sure that that's like a core part of the map, because otherwise it's not going to turn out very well. Duck walls I wouldn't put in easy. Like, I would even like argue that you can put them sometimes in normal depending on the type of map you're making, but like in easy, I would just avoid having them to move that much, right? And really, because they're going to like really move when they're first playing. They're going to misjudge the distance and stuff like that. Obviously, windows, sliders, and chains still a no-go. Doubles, I would say you scarcely use them for like really big moments in the song, like the starting of a chorus or something, or like the most intense moment in the song. Don't use a whole lot. Just be careful about how you use them. And one thing I actually have here as a notes is resets in easy. This is a controversial one. A lot of people do not like resets in the easy difficulty. I think that it can kind of be a case by case basis. Sometimes, and sometimes I flip on it. Like, maybe I don't have the same opinion in a year from now than I do right now recording this video. But the way I see it, I don't really use them often, but new players reset their hands all the time. So if you have like a long enough break in something, there's no real shame in like using a reset. So if you have like I don't know, let's go up to here. if you have like a really long time in between notes, you can like reset it or like, you know, do like this, because the way a new player is gonna hit this is they're always gonna like want to downswing on stuff like this, so they're just gonna like reset their hands anyway. So you have to just, if you're going to use resets, you should really have an idea of how a newer player is gonna operate. Even today, I'm still struggling with trying to figure out how to do that properly. I've only done it a couple times, and I don't really know how it's been received. Like, I think I did it in the easy diff for Kool-Aid recently, as of the release of this map. Like, but it was just in the beginning. It's just like a first swing down, and then it starts going down, down, up, up, and stuff. But you know, I didn't really get much feedback on people that play the easy diff on that one. Most of the people that play my lowers anyway are just act players that are trying to get these insane like 99s on my maps. So, but if you are someone that plays my lowers, I would sincerely like to know how they've been for you. Please, like, give me that feedback. But anyway, I think I've yapped your ears off long enough. How long is this video? Oh god, we're nearing the same amount as my top 10 tips. So I think that's gonna end it for today. I want to round off this first Bytes Basics on this note. Thank you again for so much of the support that you guys have shown me on that mapping tips video, and I'm really glad that there were enough people that at least I got in DMs and stuff that wanted more content like this, because personally I don't feel like there's enough content like this for mappers who may know how to do like a couple things but really want to like, because there's just so many things that you learn that are just like little tiny things over the course of a very long period of time. I'm still learning. I am still very much learning how to do the things I'm doing. So like when I say take my opinions with a pinch of salt or a grain of salt, like understand that like I am in my head like a C tier mapper compared to all the mappers that I look up to who I think are creative geniuses. But I hope that you guys found this guide helpful. I hope that maybe you learned something new. And if you want me to elaborate on anything, maybe more, like maybe I'll make another video about it, or maybe I can answer it in the comments if you have any extra questions. Otherwise, you can also message me on Discord or Twitter. I'm at Bytrius on both. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.